Thank you.
Hello, everyone. We're really pleased to continue the discussions of the day at Digital AF. And now we're going to talk about the tokenized future we're all going for. And I'm really happy for this panel to have my good friend Andrea Muttoni.
Long time no see, man.
Pierre Morin. Long time no see, man. Pierre Morin and Nicolas. Sorry, Andrea Muttoni from Andrea from Story Protocol, Story, Pierre from Pwn, and Nicolas from Courtyard. So we're gonna discuss our tokenized future, and it's, may I say, our tokenized present. But first, may you present yourselves in a few words so that the audience know yourselves and know the project you're working for.
Sure, I can definitely start. Hi everyone, my name is Andrea. I lead the DevRel team at Story. And what we do is basically try to bring intellectual property on-chain. So if you think about intellectual property, it's a pretty antiquated system. It's very hard to find, it's very hard to register. And we want to lower those barriers to entry. We want to make it more liquid. We want to make it more transparent. And make it easier for artists to protect their work and for others to use that work legally and reward those artists.
Hello everyone, my name is Pierre. I'm the head of business development for Pwn. Pwn, we like to call it the universal lending protocol for the tokenized economy, so very on topic today. And what we do is basically we allow our users to use anything and everything as collateral, as long as it's a standard ERC20, ERC721, or ERC1155, it can be used as collateral to borrow, whatever. And another cool specificity of the protocol is that you can choose your lending terms. You can choose the loan duration, the APR, the assets that you borrow, and and the loan duration. And those terms remain fixed for for the whole loan duration. So that brings a lot of flexibility into lending and opens up a lot of use cases that we're going to discuss today, but potentially using tokenized patents, IPs, real-world assets, and everything as collateral to unlock liquidity. And it's peer-to-peer, it's important. So you're not in a pool, you're actually dealing with a human counterparty or a group of humans.
So hi, I'm Nicolas. So you provide loans for assets. I bring physical asset on chain. So I'm the co-founder of Courtyard. So Courtyard is essentially bringing collectibles on chain. So we work with our partner and investor called Brinks. If you don't know what Brinks is, you just look on the street. Whenever you see an armor truck, that's Brinks. So it's the leading company when it comes to security. We vault collectibles, starting with Pokemon cards and sports cards. We vault them and represent an NFT that's like backing the card. If you own that NFT, you can trade it or you can burn it to redeem it, and we ship it in 150 countries. Our beliefs is that the next generation, there's a rise of alternative assets, and the next generation is going to look for those type of alternative assets, and we want to provide a low friction and gamified experience to be able to trade and invest, similar to Robinhood, but for collectibles, using the blockchain as a more transparent tool to prove that. So, excited for the conversation.
Beautiful, beautiful. Andrea, Pierre, Nicolas, really excited to have you here for the panel. So I have a pretty wide question maybe for our audience. Can you maybe define and help us understand what are real-world assets? What is tokenization?
Happy to start. So I think there's two categories of real-world assets. You have the whole financial component of it, like you can tokenize bonds and tokenize real estate and so on. And then you have like the collectible piece, which we're focusing on, which is anything that people own or collect. I like to define collectibles as its sentimental value associated with financial upside. And so to me, like those are the two main categories of RWAs, which is a much better term than phygital that people used to call before. I'm very happy that's gone, but yeah.
What do you mean? It was such a nice word.
No, I always said I'm never going to say that word for my company on this, but yeah.
But I would add like a third real-world asset is IP, which I know is kind of intermixed between those two that you said. But there's a big.
It's a right. It's a right. It's like a financial right,
Exactly.
intellectual property right. So it makes sense.
And the way I see it is, IP obviously is intangible, abstract, but it represents something that it represents opportunity, right? It's you can do something with it, which could be, for example, taking an NFT and creating merch, and that's a real-world asset. Or taking a real world collectible and creating a TV series with it, right? So IP is, let's say, real world potential versus asset, but the IP itself is an asset. And that should be able to be traded, etc. But we can get into that later.
I think we covered it all. But yeah, I think if I can add something, I think like everything and anything has the potential to become a real world asset. We're talking about IP, we're talking about collectibles, but down the road we could talk obviously about patents, about like trade documents, about a membership. Everything is as long as it has value for someone else, could be tokenized and be used as as collateral in our case, or as just a status whatever symbol. There's many use cases for tokenization, but I think we could discuss this. There's some assets that have more implied complexity, especially when there's an underlying physical object and something in custody somewhere, that we have like a more complex asset and different ways to interact with it.
I think the holy grail is real estate. If you think about it, what is real estate is like a piece of paper that you pay a notary to say you own that on a title, and then you go to pay him to move the ownership to somebody else when you sell the house. Like at the end of the day, blockchain is a public ledger that's much more robust and a way to transact that. So I think the government is still not there, and it's going to take a long time before, but like it makes just so much sense to cut the intermediary with blockchain. And so that would be a real world asset, for instance.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think Vitalik started talking about tokenization in 2013 when he was starting Ethereum and the whole project. So I think it's a history in the making, and it's a movement that started about 10 years ago. And if I understand well, so all these assets that can be traded on blockchains, what's the upside? What's the why do we need to trade these objects on these rights, these assets? Why do we need to trade them on chain when we can go to the next door bank and or any kind of a company and trade them?
I can, and then I'll definitely hand it over to you. But I think you answered yourself by saying bank, and. You know, like I think where blockchain comes in, aside from the transparency, decentralization, et cetera, it's lowering the barriers to entry. So putting something on chain means that anyone can access it, and anyone can build something that allows others to transact with it, right? And by transact, I mean engage with it in some way. It doesn't have to be trading or selling or buying. So by having an open ledger that anyone can read from and contribute to, you're lowering the barriers to entry, and you're not gatekeeping access to that stuff. And that stuff could be real world asset, could be IP, could be NFTs, could be anything. So I think that's like the big unlock, right? Unlocking it for everyone. And I think what we're talking about today is like a bit like how Bitcoin transformed money, how Ethereum transformed money and made it programmable. We now need to do the same with IP, with real-world assets, and make them programmable, make them easy to use, easy to interact with, composable between each other. So I can take, a Pokemon card that I borrowed from Pawn and that was ported over from Courtyard, and I can, get a license from Story and use it in something, right? Like that type of composability, and none of the three platforms talk to each other, right? Ideally. Like that's what blockchain unlocks.
Yeah, and I think another good characteristics it's accessibility. You said it. Like right now, if you want to attain or benefit from certain kinds of assets, like IP or whatever, you would have to deal with a lot of very technical, sometimes very expensive experts. You will have different standards in different jurisdictions that over-complexify the process sometimes. And the beauty of tokenization is most likely, at least for most assets, you will have to deal with a standard that is, for instance, in the RC20 or the RC721, 1155, that everybody recognizes and that allow to take your word, like the composability of it. And that also reduces a lot of frictions for users that increases accessibility also in the sense that you could have an asset, like we're talking about full asset, but you can also think about fractionalization. So it makes the whole thing more affordable because you could own, to take your example, a share of real estate. You could own some IP. I'm sure you guys offer also maybe fractionalization of IP.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. And this makes assets more affordable, accessible, exciting for people. And before you would just be, I don't know, either priced out or processed out by other things.
Cool. Yeah. So it's a question we ask ourselves a lot, and even when we talk to investors, like, why are you building on blockchain? And I think we can nail it down in like 4 categories. Number one, it's a pretty good ledger. So as we scale and we have a lot of users, it's expensive to scale a marketplace, to scale a business. Here we just listen to the chain, and we don't have to worry. Like, transactions just happen, and all we do is we listen to the blockchain. And so that's sometimes overlooked, but it's a really efficient way of scaling a company. And I think number 2 is really around we talked about this, like we call it interoperability. The fact that somebody can you truly own something digitally. You can bring that asset and prove on any other protocol, I own that. And so you could go there, you could borrow money against it without us knowing. You could fractionalize it in this protocol without us knowing. And so we see ourselves as like, we're one of the block, and anyone can build on top of it once you have that asset that's on the blockchain. And I think like the last piece is like transparency and everything around distribution. So you could have the asset traded on our marketplace, on OpenSea, on other marketplaces, and so on. And so you could really use different applications that were not possible before. So the last example we have, for instance, we have this vending machine, which is essentially you buy a digital pack, you don't know what you get a card and so on. We did a frame with it. So if you're not familiar with Farcaster, they do frame where you can do within the post. And that's just something was not possible before if we didn't have that type of thing. So a lot of opportunities there.
Beautiful, beautiful. So if I understand correctly, it's bringing all kinds of assets, all kinds of rights on blockchains so that they're accessible to everyone, even if you have, let's say, a very small portfolio, very small wallet. And then it's also very easy for builders, for entrepreneurs, to actually build on these blockchains and bring all kinds of investment solutions or rights or collectible items available to everyone to transact, buy, sell, or just keep for themselves. Am I right?
Yep.
You're right.
So I have a question for you about what's the current state of, let's say, is it an industry yet? Or is it something that's becoming and that will be an industry? Or do you categorize it as something else? How do you see the current state of, let's say, the sector, the industry of tokenization and real-world assets?
Yeah, I think it's bound to become like quite an industry. I think there was this figure, if I studied very well, I think the BlackRock, no, it was like an HSBC study that was saying that by 2030, real-world assets and tokenized assets would amount to close to 16 trillion, between 10 and 16 trillion. So it's quite massive.
So big enough to qualify as an industry.
I think so. And it's a lot of it would be tokenized, like financial assets, like commodities, like securities, like but again, like people are building to expand the use cases, and once the big guns are here and they give like credibility to the technology and the very concept of tokenization, I think that people will be reassured, and I'm sure some law firms and some experts are gonna look into it and say, hey, maybe we should look into this kind of standard in tech, and then it will become a more diversified industry.
Yeah, I think it's also a matter of knowledge. I think it took a while for the world to even know what NFT was, and now everyone that's not in Web3 thinks that NFTs are images and
of monkeys,
or of owls or penguins, and really what an NFT is a non-fungible token, so something that is unique, right? Something that is not interchangeable with something else. And that's actually the super powerful primitive, is that you can represent something uniquely and you can prove that is unique and that is the only one available. And so I think as a population, we need to just understand better what technology we have available to represent it, and go, as you were saying, also go through the legal process to accept this, right? Because, for example, where I'm based in Italy, things like notaries, they completely gatekeep access to the real estate market. And you have to go to a notary in order to buy a house and pay them thousands and thousands of euros just because they're there to say, yep, you bought the house.
That go back to the state. These are taxes, most of it. In France, it's like a 93% that goes back to the state.
In Italy, it's different. In Italy, it's a little bit goes to the state.
They usually have nice cars. So.
Yes, it's a very dream job, but they're like a caste, right? It's very hard to get into. But this panel is not about notaries. It's more to say that there's these intermediaries that are extracting value because they have siloed access and monopolized access to something that could be just tokenized, and their whole need for their existence is gone. But sorry, you wanted to add something or no? I just saw you go for the mic.
Yeah, keep the mic closer to the mouth.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
For the recording, it's okay.
Sorry.
Nicolas, any
so
comment?
I think, to me, it's as much an industry as, like, I do the analogy with the apps when, like there was the iPhone and we created the apps. I don't think like apps are, it's a new shift that created a lot of like innovation in a new industry with a lot of growth. But I see that RWA as more like that new technology that will be used in different industries and different pieces, similar to app turn into, there's no app industry. There's so many different industry that uses app. And I think that's how we're going to see it for RWAs.
Okay, so it's not an industry in itself. It's so the blockchains are smartphones, and all the kinds of applications we can build on.
There will be
on
apps built on that for real estate, for different things, and we're just going to use that new technology.
Yeah.
That's better than what was before, basically. Yeah.
Okay. And what about the all the investment only tokenized digital assets? Do you see that as an industry in itself, or still it's very varied between, I don't know, precious metals?
I would say that, for instance,
and
precious
stocks.
metals is the gold market, for instance. That's the market itself that you use the RWAs and tokenization for it. But at the end of the day, you invest in a gold bullion. You don't invest, even if it's tokenized.
Makes sense. So tokenization is just a technology.
It's a revolutionized shift in technology that will help make it better in the future for me.
Okay, beautiful. Another comment? No? Pierre? I don't know. You look like you wanted to do one.
Yeah, I had more a question about you guys that are dealing more with the trad people and lawyers and everything. I'm curious to know the level of excitement, because notary is a good example, you dealing with potential lawyers and people that have something to lose in tokenization. How do you address that, and do you have them how do you have them on board, because you still need them at this stage?
For sure. And by the way, I'm not saying that we should get rid of all those intermediaries. I'm saying that, for example, lawyers, right? Story is not trying to replace the legal system. It's just trying to add a discoverability and transparency and availability layer on top, where IP is easy to find, easy to build off of, easy to create derivatives of, right? So you can take so I own, let's just use practical examples, right? I own a specific, I don't know if you have unique one-of-one real-world assets that you can bring on to your vault, but let's say I own one of those and I own the NFT. I have then the rights to use it however I want. I can I can register on Story and create some license terms, right? That say, hey, if you want to use it in a real-world use case or for anything, for commercial reasons, you have to give me 5% of royalties of revenue share. You have to pay me upfront X amount to get a license to use it, XXXX. And that can all be done automatically via Story, but then whenever you get into the real world, you still need to have a legal process to defend that IP, to defend that license. And obviously, we're not trying to replace the trademark office, the copyright office, et cetera. So I think it's really a matter, going back to your question, is how do you? Oh, sorry. No, wow, I can hear myself a lot better now. How do you? I think the current world has to adapt to this new medium and can't expect to be doing what they do today, or they're just going to be disrupted, right? We're still going to need lawyers. We're still going to probably, unfortunately, need notaries, but they're probably going to have to change their job and maybe do something different.
I have like a different point of view on this. I mean, like we said, it's just a technology, tokenization. So, for instance, if you're a notary, you have the expertise of actually looking through dozens of different documents about the asset you're selling or you're transacting. So, I think that knowledge and expertise can still be used with a blockchain
100%.
infrastructure. So, I mean, it's just notary 3.0, but it's still notaries.
Yeah. But maybe we may need less of them. And definitely not the Italian ones.
We're sorry, our Italian friends. It's Andrea. It's not me talking or others. Okay, really interesting. So, Story, you use it for existing IP or just for new IPs?
Both. So, a way to see it is, you know how USDC allows to on-ramp and off-ramp fiat? Story allows to on-ramp and off-ramp IP. So a current existing, let's say, Bored Ape can be turned into an IP by registering it. So when you register something on Story, you're actually either attaching an intellectual property account to an existing NFT or creating an NFT that represents that real-world asset. So in the case of Courtyard, for example, we would probably use the existing NFT, right? That you guys mint to represent your certified real-world asset. And what happens is it gets, and sorry if I get a little nerdy here, but what happens is that NFT gets a token-bound account. That token-bound account is the beating heart of the actual IP asset, and it regulates things via modules. It regulates things like royalties, like licenses, like dispute processes. All of that is regulated via smart contracts. So and via that IP account, you can set your license terms for your IP. People can come and mint licenses from those license terms. And licenses, by the way, are also NFTs that can be traded and perhaps speculated on. The royalty tokens that get distributed when you create a derivative IP give you an entitlement to the royalties that the license asks for. So like if you want to take your IP and create something with it, you have to abide by those terms and pay X amount of revenue per year or whatever it is. Whoever owns the royalty tokens to that IP can claim that percentage of revenue, right? So it's a very decentralized approach.
Beautiful. As I understand it, Story is a full-fledged legal solution for IPs.
Yeah, we're trying to represent the existing legal system on-chain in a programmable way. That's why we say programmable IP, so that it can be programmably used without having to like jump out of the chain and do things via contracts and then jump back in.
Can it be updated?
Yeah. I mean, the contracts can be updated, but yeah. Yeah.
So you can change, like if you have 5% royalty, could you just be like, hey, I'm moving up, or
for sure. You can create a new set of terms, and you can disable. So every set of terms you set. So an IP can have multiple set of terms. You can have, for example, a non-commercial set of terms. So if you want to use my IP for non-commercial stuff, here's the terms. You can create X amount of commercial terms, and you can also set how many licenses can be minted from each set of terms. So if you want to deprecate one set of terms, you can just say, hey, you can't mint any more licenses from this. You have to use this one.
I have to say, congrats to you, because it's so complicated. I used to work in music royalties before with like YouTube and so on, and it's just the most complicated problem to tackle. So huge congrats to you.
I mean, it's
tackle that.
Yeah. Congrats to the engineering team.
Yeah.
And the lawyers.
And the lawyers, yeah.
Pierre, could you tell us a little bit more about Pawn?
Yeah, of course. So as we said, as I said, like a universal lending protocol and we peer-to-peer as well. So that means compared to other lending protocols that you're probably familiar with, like Aave, Morpho, Compound, all this stuff, we're not pool-based. that's good in a sense because you can use anything as collateral to request anything as long as someone finds your terms interesting.
There are no liquidity pools as what we can find in DeFi.
Nope.
Okay.
No liquidity pools. Your liquidity is the person on the other side of the deal. So in the case for IP, that would be a little complicated maybe to have a pool set up. Could probably be done, but if someone is interested in this very specific IP, either a lender could say, "Hey, I'm willing to give this much, to lend this much, if I get this as collateral, this IP as collateral, or this collectible as collateral." Or someone could come on the borrower side and say, "I have this collectible, and I want to borrow this much." And then it works more or less as a marketplace where you have all those intents, like people looking to borrow or to lend. And as soon as someone finds the deal interesting, the collateral is sent to an escrow contract. And the only two ways to get your collateral back, or there are only two ways to reopen this escrow contract, let's put it that way, is either to pay back with interest, or in case of default, the lender could just claim the collateral. And for the whole loan duration, there's no risk of liquidation. So even if there are price fluctuations, you wouldn't be liquidated. It's just a time-based liquidation.
And how do you check the default situation? You have an oracle checking things from.
There are no oracles.
No?
It's just that at the beginning, of course, you have the price for an asset. Sometimes it's a little trickier to price. I don't know, for IPs, for instance. For collectible, usually it's easier because there's a market, for instance. For
Depends on the asset. It is somehow possible
easier
with eBay transactions and stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's for some, let's put it that way. For some tokenized assets, it's very easy because there's a live price feed and whatever. So on the platform, you would see it's worth this much at this moment. And so you could make an informed decision on how much you want to borrow or lend. But for some assets, sometimes it's not priced. We had an example of someone who used their reputation as collateral. They use their ENS and they say, "Hey, I'm a reputable person in the space." You can imagine Vitalik coming and say, "Hey, I'm putting down Vitalik.eth as collateral on Pawn, borrowing 10 million.
I can see Pierre doing that as well.
I mean, after this panel, when I'm famous, yeah, probably. But right now, low value individual.
A reputation is IP.
Yeah, true. And you could there's no price feed for Vitalik. Maybe there's an offer, someone wants to buy it, but you could put your social reputation as collateral. That's something we're also exploring, like maybe using social markers, decentralized identifiers, or things like this that inform the picture, give a picture of you as an individual, and you could get better rates, or even down the road, maybe under collateralized rates, just like in the bank, for instance.
I have two questions for you. As a marketplace with like the buy side and the sell side, what's the hardest to find? Is it people to give loans or people to actually take loans on that?
That's a very good question. It depends on the since you're peer-to-peer, you have to match offer and demand. So sometimes we have people on the lending side that say, "Hey, I'm willing to give 250K, but I want those 3 assets as collateral only, and I want more than 25% APY on USDC." But the lender, they were trying to get on the borrower side, they're trying to get the best deal for them is like the lowest interest rate. It's I think there are difficulties with both. But what's helping Pawn in a way is that for a lot of assets, we're the only market they have.
I was going to say, the second question was what's the weirdest collateral you've done on the platform? What's the most surprising?
It's not necessarily weird, but I think it's fun. There's a winemaker in Argentina that is just tokenizing its wine production. So you harvest your grapes, you put them in your vats, but you have to wait 3 years until it's actually bottled and sold. And so he said, hey, what am I going to do? I'm going to tokenize my wine production. I have an estimate of how many bottles I'm going to make. And each bottle is a token. And he pre-sells the tokens. And he still owns a lot of his production because he used like a few of his bottles as collateral, borrowed, and used the money to
cash flow to do the business.
Yeah, exactly. And then once he has like revenue selling, for instance, your 2 bottles, he pays back his loan. He's actually going to do it again in August. And we're going to showcase this.
Did I send you a testing bottle
The what?
Did they send you a bottle?
Yeah, they actually were. We had a conference in Prague because most of the team is based in Prague, and he came with a few bottles, and there was a wine tasting. It's
That's
actually
cool.
pretty good stuff. Do you try it? No.
The disappointment
I
on
didn't
his face.
But yeah, and you can imagine a lot of things like this. Like yeah.
Tokenizing future glasses of wine, that's an exciting prospect.
Mm-hmm.
But doesn't the wine have to be like certified? Like, aren't you using Courtyard for the actual wine bottles that are put up for collateral?
We're not doing wine.
You're not doing wine?
There are
You're
companies
saying it
that-
like you don't want to do wine.
Yeah, there's a lot of like legal restriction
Oh,
when you
okay.
talk to alcohol, like within country. We ship in like 25 plus countries. And each country has their different regulation. Apparently, it's illegal to own Pokemon card in Saudi. So we tried to do a redemption, but like got blocked by custom.
Wow.
So you learn all those nuances of like, but that's cool because that person now has a collection and he can actually own it, even if he cannot own it because of the decentralized nature of it.
Yeah, no, very very interesting. Nicolas, could you tell us more about Courtyard? And I hope you can sell Pokemon cards everywhere in the world. But,
Oh my God.
And,
Yeah,
and sorry, I also want to ask you after the same exact question you asked him. What's the craziest thing you...
Oh, I have a lot of those. So launched Courtyard about 2 years and a half ago at the early days. So prior to Bored Apes, prior to that, and we saw NFTs as a way of like proving ownership of something. And so we were like, why don't we store it in somewhere secure? And we thought of who can be secure to trust us to like, why would you put your high value collectibles? And so we literally called up Brinks. Sometimes you just pick up the phone, you call. Went up the ladder. We were this team coming from big tech, so like Google, Apple, and so on. And they ended up liking the project because they didn't used to store Pokemon cards. And we were like, let's sign an exclusive deal for 1 year. And so that was the whole start of it. We borrowed some money from a friend, $500,000, and went to buy $500,000 of Pokemon cards at auctions. So had to learn this way. Bought everything, we put it together. We did a drop 2 years ago on Polygon. That was like when Polygon was not where it is right now. So you had to bridge, your money disappears for an hour, and then you reappear somewhere. And so it was this whole thing explaining people how to buy those, but the drop sold out in an hour. And so that was really the start of like Courtyard as let's start with collectibles. And we started with Pokemon cards because we're like, all those people are like 20 to 35 years old. And so what did they have as a kid? Pokemon cards. And nostalgia is a very powerful feeling. And so they collect NFTs, why not Pokemon cards? And so that's how I really started. I think focusing on one category first helps like finding their users, because somebody who collects Pokemon cards doesn't collect sneakers, doesn't collect watches. And so you need buyers and sellers. And if you focus on one small niche first, you can prove the model and then expand to another one and then expand to another one. So that's the genesis story of Courtyard, if you want. Now we are, we have a big marketplace with like 30,000 users. A lot of them are Web 2, so they're not traditional collectors because they are card collectors that just love the platform.
Okay, and can you only trade Pokemon cards on Courtyard, or?
So we have like sports cards, Marvel cards, and so on.
I can buy my favorite Zinedine Zidane card.
We have some Zinedine Zidane. We have one that's worth $4,000 on the platform. If you
Oh,
want.
nice.
Was it the headbutt one where he headbutted in the Euros?
No. Yeah, you have a lot of it. So to answer your question, whenever you talk about collectibles, you meet so many people people collect every sort of things. Like you talk to people, they I collect frisbees. I have a $4,000 frisbee. It's like there's just so many different like knives, frisbee, and all those pockets of collectors that are just within those. Yeah, there's a lot of weird niche of collectibles, definitely.
Very interesting. I think they all make sense. Nice Pokemons, Zinedine Zidane, and frisbees. Very nice array of possible assets to trade on Courtyard. So we've discussed what real-world assets are, what tokenized assets are. They're really easy for us builders and entrepreneurs to actually put these on some kind of marketplace, some kind of exchange, some kind of place where you can store it, you can transact it. How is it for users? Nicolas, you started talking about users 2 years ago, trying to use Polygon as it was back then. Do you think it's easy to onboard, like you say, Web 2 or traditional users that are not really Web 3 focused on these platforms? How do you do it? Is it easy, and how do you do it?
So a lot of people don't care about Web3. When we started, we put assets on the blockchain and they actually hate NFTs because they got scammed or something like this. So our goal is we call it hide the wires. So make it as seamless that you don't even realize you're on the blockchain if you don't care about the blockchain. But if you do, you can connect your wallet, you can use your fund and so on. So we build a marketplace that you log in with, we work with Privy for that. You log in, you create an account with a Google account or an email, automatically we create a wallet for you. You can link your own and have the two wallets to your account, but it's just an account as far as you're concerned. You can pay everything with a credit card and there's no gas fee. So we use a relayer, so now there is account abstraction in relayers, where you just click and we pay gas fee, so we pay Matic on your behalf. So you don't even realize that there is a signature or something if you don't care about it. And so a lot of our users are just thinking it's a normal platform, but we have Web3 users who are deep into and they want to bring their own ledger, they want to connect their own wallet and pay with their crypto there. So that's how we're trying to really abstract the friction of Web3 for people who don't care about Web3 while still enabling people that care about it to bring their Web3 wholesale.
So let's say Web 2.5, some Web 2 users using Web 3 without realizing it, and then some, let's say, Web 3 native
exactly, because
users.
At the beginning, at the end of the day, if you want somebody to buy, like people who are into Web 3, it's cool, I have an asset on the blockchain, they're gonna maybe buy 1 or 2 cards because they're not passionate about Pokemon cards. We want the fanatics of those cards that are gonna buy 250, 300 of those, right? And so we need to target and focus on the assets we're selling rather the technology that's enabling it for getting those users to be like high spender on the platform and like using the platform like a lot. And so that's where we realize the shift is really, let's abstract it for people and focus on the collectors of what we're selling.
I'm going to steal the term hide the wires. It was music to my ears.
Yeah. Hide the wires.
Yes, beautiful. I have something, but I see you were going for it. Do you want to go first?
No, it's like Pawn doesn't hide the wires. There are lots of wires, and I mean it's very DeFi native. So it's.
But your users are like DeFi. They
Exactly.
like that. So
Yes.
I think it's different
Yep.
because your users are like the DeFi people that really care about like early adopters of technology, and they're
Yes.
like heavy users, and they use like different they use Aave and different protocol as well.
Real wire lovers, yeah.
But it's that just it's complicated right now. But again, as every technology, you need like the pioneers, and we doing this. Like we experimenting with a lot of different assets. We trying to see what works, what catches on with people, what they use the app for, and down the road you could have different levels. You could have like the very, let's say, a pro mode pawn where everything is on the table, like all the terms, you set everything yourself, you can fine tune to the extreme, and have things that are a little more guided or with like using market data to say, hey, maybe this is a reasonable rate, or even have like some factors that are predetermined that you are free to change, but that would probably cater to a less advanced type of users. But right now, lots of wires.
Yeah, that makes sense. As you can imagine, IP is a very complicated topic that a lot of people just like hand wave and say, I don't want to deal with it. And so what we're trying to do is not only hide the wires, but also bring the wires to platforms that have the artists, have the creators, and meet the users where they are. So for example, Magma is everyone's heard of Figma, right? Photoshop, etc. It's a collaborative Photoshop. So people can multiplayer create art. And they have 2.5 million users. And we're working with them so that when you finish an artwork, instead of just going export to PNG, you can go to File, Register Artwork. And you just go through a Web 2.0 process. Everything happens behind the scenes. Wires are hidden. And you can set your license terms with a nice, easy-to-use UI. And then it's done. You don't even have to leave Magma at all. Of course, you can see the license terms on the Story protocol side, but the only way that we're going to get people to actually register IP is if we make it as easy as possible, and they can do it from the tools that they already use. So that's the type of approach that we're going with.
So it's not a world where people say, talk to my lawyer. It's a world where
Exactly.
people say, just go on Story and click.
Yeah, or just use, let's say, Figma, let's use Magma, use Photoshop, ideally, right? In a perfect world, we would be all over the place already, but we're starting with, 2.5 million users is already a pretty big app.
Not bad.
And just use whatever you use and save it and register it. So
Beautiful, beautiful. So we've seen what these assets are, how to use them, how your projects actually build on this new technology, what it brings to users, and I have in the current state of the sector of the industry. And I have a question for you about the future. So what Story, what Pawn, what Courtyard are going to be 2-3 years, maybe 5 years from now? What's the overall, not industry, but landscape, real world asset landscape and tokenization landscape is going to be a few years from now? What's your take on this?
We're gonna still the future, at least for Pawn, is gonna push further into universality and making sure that people experiment with the capabilities of the protocol. Because, for instance, now you have more and more projects that are inviting startups to tokenize some of the shares. It's a very powerful tool because you could just use these shares as collateral, raise funds, and hopefully the funds are used well enough that you can pay back your loan. And otherwise, if you don't pay back, you diluted the way you would have been diluted if you had gone the VC route or whatever. And maybe you also tokenize IP, tokenize patents, everything that's going to come on chain that is tokenized. Every real world asset is again compatible with us. So hopefully we'll get people experimenting and seeing how powerful leverage is when you try to grow a business, grow your net worth. I don't know, and there's so much you can do with tokenized assets, and we're gonna be there.
Cool. Yeah, I can go next. So, yeah, I think Courtyard, we are going to be, and we want to be, and we are going to be I would say the Robin Hood for alternative assets. So new generation want to invest in different types of assets, and they want to have fun with it. So they need frictionless, they want to have fun with it, and they want to invest in something that's other than a boring Apple stock. That's why you see the rise in meme stock and stuff. People want to invest more emotionally, and they want to have experiences fun experiences when they do so. So we are working and relentlessly to reduce friction and providing fun experiences. Would it be with a pack opening? Would it be instant liquidity when you can resell it, and making it accessible so that we remove the scams, because it's a world that if you don't know, you might get fooled very easily. And I think the transparency of the blockchain allows it for much more people to enter that space. And so we've been growing insanely fast. We're growing 60% month over month, reaching millions of dollars of transaction a month. And so we want to become this new platform for the new generation for investing in alternative assets.
Wow, really exciting. I have one question both for the present and the future. How do you deal with liquidity and let's say everything around collateralization? I think that's the big question for the coming month and coming years. How these assets are going to be able to be traded really easily with enough liquidity, and how collateralization plays a role in that.
Again, for us, liquidity is not necessarily the issue. Again, because we're peer-to-peer. As long as someone finds something attractive, you can unlock liquidity. But what we're working on is trying to find more creative ways to match demand and offer, maybe new types of loans, Dutch auction loans, where basically the interest rates and the parameters are dynamic, and when basically you hit a point that is interesting to a counterparty, you get funded. We also harder work to have more and more integrations. More and more projects that know about us and are accurately tracked and priced on the platform and things like this to to talking to market makers, talking to capital allocators, all the ecosystem, because anyone can participate on Pawn, and so that's the way to do it. You have to talk to everyone, and you have to be kind of top of mind, because again, for a lot of assets today, we're the only market you're going to find if you want to leverage yourself against it. So, yeah.
Can I talk about the future of Story as well?
Maybe.
No.
So ideally, in the future, not too long from now, anyone can, and I really liked your point about having fun. You know, I think the world needs to have more fun. It's becoming too serious. So even things like memes or IP, right? Things that, yeah, we want to make it possible for anyone that creates anything that others may or may not want to use to be able to protect it and be able to license it easily. That's like the TLDR. And I think it's going to be especially important now with AI coming. Well, not coming, already here, and getting even more commonplace. AI is eating everyone, right? It's generating content at the speed of light. It's munching on everything that's been created and just regurgitating it constantly and constantly. And so the more we go forwards, the more AI is going to be trained on itself, because it's going to be trained on the internet. Since 2023, the internet is basically just ChatGPT. Like every blog, everything is just ChatGPT-ified. And so it's reducing incentives for people to actually create, because they know that it's just going to be crawled, it's going to be ingested, and then anyone else can leverage. For example, let's say you want to generate a painting of something in watercolor. As a watercolor painter, I don't want my original art to be fed into a model that can then just be reused to create infinite art. And so having a way for these artists to protect their work and to be compensated for that work, I think is going to be very, very important, and we want to be part of that.
Do you have open conversations with companies like this? Like,
we have open conversations with AI companies, yes. Not OpenAI, but other big ones.
So we have, our panel is almost touching to its end, and we have a few final questions from our audience. They sent it to me on my Telegram. Thank you, the audience. So please, could you explain what happens if I put my Courtyard NFT on Story and it's a Pokemon card? Wouldn't that infringe on existing Pokemon IP? How do you navigate on this?
So that's true. When you were talking about I didn't interrupt on this. So there is two sales doctrines that allows you to tokenize an asset, which means you can represent. It's similar when you post an image on eBay, you have to represent the assets for it to be sold, right? You need to properly represent it. What we cannot do, we cannot put the Charizard card with like flames behind it on the NFT. Like that would be creating additional content to make it prettier and nicer to be sold afterwards. So the second thing we cannot do is we cannot issue multiple NFTs for the same card. It has to be one-to-one backing. And so you may be familiar with like the StockX and Nike lawsuit that happened. We did spend way too much money on lawyers to analyze and freaked out when this happened, but like we did a lot of analysis. And so what Nike alleges is that StockX sold more NFT than they had shoes in stock, and so on. And so they alleges as well that they made it seem like it was Nike associated. So it is protected to have a one-to-one backing. What we cannot do is just like create additional value for those, or say if you buy that NFT, you're getting something on top of it. Like, I don't know, you're getting like a free t-shirt or something like that. We cannot do that. It has to be one-to-one.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also note with that specific Pokemon example, you're not the IP holder, right? You own the Pokemon card. That doesn't give you entitlement to the IP behind Pokemon. Whereas, let's say an art piece. Do you do art on Courtyard?
Not yet.
No, not yet. But let's say I would buy a piece of art, right? And the artist says whoever owns this piece of art owns the rights to it and can do whatever they want with it. Then you could definitely register the IP on Story. But just because you can register something doesn't mean you should do it. A bit like how you can't go to a copyright office and just register this Pokemon card as your IP. So I think it really depends on the type of asset that's underlying. And that's why we have a dispute process.
And for instance, we could not build a game on Pokemon cards without the approval of the company that has the IP for it.
Definitely. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for enlightening us on this beautiful future of a tokenized world. It was a really exciting panel, and then we'll leave the room to the next panel. To Alex. Yeah. See you guys. Thank you very
for having
much.
us.
Thank you very much.
You.